offensive term by the darker-skinned Maghrebians it is intended to identify. For example, people in the southern region, e.g., Wad Noun, Dra of Morocco, consider it to be an offensive term. Despite its questionable historicity and etymology, European colonialists and European Africanists have used the term Haratan as identifiers for groups of black and apparently mixed people found in Algeria, Mauritania, and Morocco. The Saadian invasion of the Songhai Empire serves as the precursor to later narratives that grouped darker-skinned Maghrebians together and identified their origins as sub-Saharan West Africa. With gold serving as a motivation behind the Saadian invasion of the Songhai Empire, this made way for changes in latter behaviors toward dark-skinned Africans. As a result of changing behaviors toward dark-skinned Africans, darker-skinned Maghrebians were forcibly recruited into the army of Ismail ibn Sharif as the Black Guard, based on the claim of them having descended from enslaved peoples from the times of the Saadian invasion. Shurafa historians of the modern period would later utilize these events in narratives about the manumission of enslaved Hartani, a vague term, which by merit of it needing further definition, is implicit evidence for its questionable historicity. The narratives derived from Shurafa historians would later become analogically incorporated into the Americanized narratives, e.g., the trans-Saharan slave trade, imported enslaved sub-Saharan West Africans, darker-skinned Maghrebian freedmen, of the present-day European Africanist paradigm. As opposed to having been developed through field research, the analogy in the present-day European Africanist paradigm, which conceptually alienates dehistoricized and denaturalized darker-skinned North Africans in North Africa and darker-skinned Africans throughout the Islamic world, at large is primarily rooted in an Americanized textual tradition inherited from 19th-century European Christian abolitionists. Consequently, reliable history, as opposed to an antiquated analogy-based history, for darker-skinned North Africans and darker-skinned Africans in the Islamic world, are limited. Part of the textual tradition generally associates an inherited status of servant with dark skin, e.g., Negro labor, Negro cultivators, Negroid slaves, freedmen. The European Africanist paradigm uses this as the primary reference point for its construction of origins narratives for darker-skinned North Africans, e.g., imported slaves from sub-Saharan West Africa. With darker-skinned North Africans or darker-skinned Africans in the Islamic world, treated as an allegory of alterity. Another part of the textual tradition is the trans-Saharan slave trade, and their presence in these regions are treated as that of an African diaspora in North Africa and the Islamic world. Altogether, darker-skinned North Africans, e.g., black and apparently mixed Maghrebians, darker-skinned Africans in the Islamic world, the inherited status of servant associated with dark skin, and the trans-Saharan slave trade are conflated and modeled in analogy with African Americans and the transatlantic slave trade. The trans-Saharan slave trade has been used as a literary device in narratives that analogically explain the origins of darker-skinned North Africans in North Africa and the Islamic world. Camel trains have been equated with slave ships, and the amount of forcibly enslaved Africans transported across the Sahara are alleged to be numerically comparable to the considerably large amount of forcibly enslaved Africans transported across the Atlantic Ocean. The simulated narrative of comparable numbers is contradicted by the limited presence of darker-skinned North Africans in the present-day Maghreb. As part of this simulated narrative, post-classical Egypt has also been characterized as having plantations. Another part of this simulated narrative is an Orientalist construction of hypersexualized Moors, concubines, and eunuchs. Concubines and harems have been used as an explanatory bridge between the allegation of comparable numbers of forcibly enslaved Africans and the limited number of present-day darker-skinned Maghrebians, who have been characterized as their diasporic descendants. Eunuchs were characterized as sentinels who guarded these harems. The simulated narrative is also based on the major assumption that the indigenous peoples of the Maghreb were once purely white, Berbers, who then became biracialized through miscegenation with black concubines, existing within a geographic racial binary of pale-skinned Moors residing further north, closer to the Mediterranean region, and dark-skinned Moors residing further south, closer to the Sahara. The religious polemical narrative involving the suffering of enslaved European Christians of the Barbary slave trade has also been adapted to fit the idea of a comparable number of enslaved Africans transported by Muslim slaver caravans from the south of Saharan Africa into North Africa and the Islamic world. Despite inheriting 19th-century religious polemical narratives, the use of race in the secularism of present-day European Africanist paradigm has given the paradigm an appearance of possessing scientific quality. The religious polemical narrative, e.g., holy cause, hostile neologisms, of 19th-century European abolitionists about Africa and Africans are silenced, but still preserved, in the secularist narratives of the present-day European Africanist paradigm. The Orientalist stereotype of hypersexuality of the Moors was viewed by 19th-century European abolitionists as deriving from the Quran. The reference to times prior, often used in concert with biblical references by 19th-century European abolitionists, may indicate that realities described of Moors may have been literary fabrications. The purpose of these apparent literary fabrications may have been to affirm their view of the Bible as greater than the Quran and to affirm the viewpoints held by the readers of their composed works. The adoption of 19th-century European abolitionists' religious polemical narrative into the present-day European Africanist paradigm may have been due to its correspondence with the established textual tradition. The use of stereotyped hypersexuality for Moors are what 19th-century European abolitionists and the present-day European Africanist paradigm have in common. Due to a lack of considerable development in field research regarding enslavement in Islamic societies, this has resulted in the present-day European Africanist paradigm relying on unreliable estimates for the trans-Saharan slave trade. Insufficient data has also been used as a justification for continued use of the faulty present-day European Africanist paradigm. Darker-skinned Maghrebians, particularly in Morocco, have grown weary of the lack of discretion foreign academics have shown toward them, bear resentment toward the way they have been depicted by foreign academics, and consequently find the intended activities of foreign academics to be predictable. Rather than continuing to rely on the faulty present-day European Africanist paradigm, Mohammed, 2012, recommends revising and improving the current Africanist paradigm, e.g., critical inspection of the origins and introduction of the present characterization of the Saharan caravan, reconsideration of what makes the trans-Saharan slave trade, within its own context in Africa, distinct from the transatlantic slave trade, realistic consideration of the experiences of darker-skinned Maghrebians within their own regional context. Marola, 2017, had indicated that the academic study of sub-Saharan Africa and North Africa by Europeans developed with North Africa was conceptually subsumed within the Middle East and Arab world, whereas the study of sub-Saharan Africa was viewed as conceptually distinct from North Africa and as its own region, viewed as inherently the same. The common pattern of conceptual separation of continental Africa into two regions, and the view of conceptual sameness within the region of sub-Saharan Africa, has continued until present day. Yet, with increasing exposure of this problem, discussion about the conceptual separation of Africa has begun to develop. The Sahara had served as a trans-regional zone for peoples in Africa. Authors from various countries, e.g., Algeria, Cameroon, Sudan, in Africa, have critiqued the conceptualization of the Sahara as a regional barrier and provided counter-arguments supporting the interconnectedness of continental Africa. There are historic and cultural connections as well as trade between West Africa, North Africa, and East Africa, e.g., North Africa with Niger and Mali, North Africa with Tanzania and Sudan, major hubs of Islamic learning in Niger and Mali. Africa has been conceptually compartmentalized into meaning Black Africa, Africa south of the Sahara, and Sub-Saharan Africa. North Africa has been conceptually orientalized and separated from Sub-Saharan Africa. While its historic development has occurred within a longer time frame, the epistemic development, e.g., form, content, of the present-day racialized conceptual separation of Africa came as a result of the Berlin Conference and the scramble for Africa. In African and Berber literary studies, scholarship has remained largely separate from one another. The conceptual separation of Africa in these studies may be due to how editing policies of studies in the Anglophone and Francophone world are affected by the international politics of the Anglophone and Francophone world. While studies in the Anglophone world have more clearly followed the trend of the conceptual separation of Africa, the Francophone world has been more nuanced, which may stem from imperial policies relating to French colonialism in North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. As the study of North Africa has largely been initiated by the Arabophone and Francophone world, denial of the Arabic language having become Africanized throughout the centuries, it has been present in Africa has shown that the conceptual separation of Africa remains pervasive in the Francophone world. This denial may stem from historic development of the characterization of an Islamic Arabia existing as a diametric binary to Europe. Among studies in the Francophone world, ties between North Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa have been denied or downplayed, while the ties, e.g., religious, cultural, between the regions and peoples, e.g., Arab language and literature with Berber language and literature, of the Middle East and North Africa, have been established by diminishing the differences between the two and selectively focusing on the similarities between the two. In the Francophone world, construction of racialized regions such as Black Africa, Sub-Saharan Africans, and White Africa, North Africans, e.g., Berbers and Arabs, has also developed, despite having invoked and utilized identities in reference to the racialized conceptualizations of Africa, e.g., North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, to oppose imposed identities. Berbers have invoked North African identity to oppose Arabized and Islamicized identities. And Sub-Saharan Africans, e.g., negritude, Black consciousness, and the African diaspora, e.g., Black is beautiful, have invoked and utilized Black identity to oppose colonialism and racism. While Berber studies has largely sought to establish ties between Berbers and North Africa with Arabs and the Middle East, Marola, 2017, indicated that efforts to establish ties between Berbers and North Africa with Sub-Saharan Africans and Sub-Saharan Africa have recently started. Health Traditional African Medicine. Traditional African medicine is a holistic discipline involving indigenous herbalism and African spirituality. Practitioners claim to be able to cure various and diverse conditions. Modern science has in the past considered methods of traditional knowledge as primitive and backward. Under colonial rule, traditional diviner healers were outlawed because they were considered by many nations to be practitioners of witchcraft and declared illegal by the colonial authorities, creating a war against witchcraft and magic. During this time, attempts were also made to control the sale of herbal medicines. As colonialism and Christianity spread through Africa, colonialists built general hospitals, and Christian missionaries built private ones, with the hopes of making headway against widespread diseases. Little was done to investigate the legitimacy of these practices, as many foreigners believed that the native medical practices were pagan and superstitious and could only be suitably fixed by inheriting Western methods. During times of conflict, opposition has been particularly vehement, as people are more likely to call on the supernatural realm. Consequently, doctors and health practitioners have, in most cases, continued to shun traditional practitioners, despite their contribution to meeting the basic health needs of the population. In recent years, the treatments and remedies used in traditional African medicine have gained more appreciation from researchers in Western science. Developing countries have begun to realize the high costs of modern healthcare systems and the technologies that are required, thus proving Africa's dependence on it. Due to this, interest has recently been expressed in integrating traditional African medicine into the continent's national healthcare systems. Disease has been a hindrance to human development in West Africa throughout history. The environment, especially the tropical rainforests, allow many single-cell organisms, parasites, and bacteria to thrive and prosper. Prior to the slave trade, West Africans strived to maintain ecological balance, controlling vegetation and game, and thereby minimizing the prevalence of local diseases. The increased amount and intensity of warfare due to the slave trade meant that the ecological balance could not be sustained. Endemic diseases became epidemic in scale. Genetic mutations developed that provided increased resistance to disease, such as sickle cell, evident in the Kwa forest agriculturalists from C700 CE, providing some protection from malaria. HIV/AIDS in Africa and Western Africa. In the 1990s, AIDS became a significant problem for the region, particularly in Côte d'Ivoire, Liberia, and Nigeria. The onset of the HIV epidemic in the region began in 1985, with reported cases in Benin and Nigeria, and in nearby countries, such as Côte d'Ivoire, in subsequent years. AIDS was at first considered a disease of gay men and drug addicts, but in Africa, it took off among the general population. As a result, those involved in the fight against HIV began to emphasize aspects such as preventing transmission from mother to child, or the relationship between HIV and poverty, inequality of the sexes, and so on. rather than emphasizing the need to prevent transmission by unsafe sexual practices or drug injection. This change in emphasis resulted in more funding, but was not effective in preventing a drastic rise in HIV prevalence. The global response to HIV and AIDS has improved considerably in recent years. Funding comes from many sources, the largest of which are the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, Tuberculosis, and Malaria, and the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. As of 2011, HIV prevalence in Western Africa is lowest in Senegal and highest in Nigeria, which has the second largest number of people living with HIV in Africa after South Africa. Ebola virus disease. Ebola virus disease, first identified in 1976, typically occurs in outbreaks in tropical regions of sub-Saharan Africa, including West Africa. From 1976 through 2013, the World Health Organization reported 1,616 confirmed cases. The largest outbreak to date is the ongoing 2014 West Africa Ebola virus outbreak, which is affecting Guinea, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Nigeria. The outbreak began in Guinea in December 2013 but was not detected until March 2014, after which it spread to Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria. The outbreak is caused by the Zaire Ebola virus, known simply as the Ebola virus, EBOV. It is the most severe outbreak of Ebola in terms of the number of human cases and fatalities since the discovery of the virus in 1976. As of 16 August 2014, the World Health Organization, WHO, reported 2,140 suspected cases and 1,229 deaths, 1,283 confirmed cases, and 760 deaths. On 8 August, it formally designated the outbreak as a public health emergency of international concern. This is a legal designation used only twice before, for the 2009 H1N1 swine flu pandemic and the 2014 resurgence of polio, and invokes legal measures on disease prevention, surveillance, control, and response by 194 signatory countries. Various aid organizations and international bodies, including the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, and the European Commission have donated funds and mobilized personnel to help counter the outbreak. Charities including Médecins Sans Frontières, the Red Cross, and Samaritan's Purse are also working in the area. Famine in Africa. Famine has been an occasional but serious problem in West Africa. In the 1680s, famine extended across the entire Sahel, and in 1738, half the population of Timbuktu died of famine. Some colonial pacification efforts often caused severe famine. The introduction of cash crops such as cotton and forcible measures to impel farmers to grow these crops sometimes impoverished the peasantry in many areas, such as northern Nigeria, contributing to greater vulnerability to famine when severe drought struck in 1913. For the middle part of the 20th century, agriculturalists, economists, and geographers did not consider Africa to be famine-prone. Most famines were localized and brief food shortages. From 1967 to 1969, large-scale famine occurred in Biafra and Nigeria due to a government blockade of the breakaway territory. It is estimated that 1.5 million people died of starvation due to this famine. Additionally, drought and other government interference with the food supply caused 500,000 Africans to perish in Central and West Africa. Famine recurred in the 1970s and 1980s, when the West African Sahel suffered drought and famine. The Sahelian famine was associated with the slowly growing crisis of pastoralism in Africa, which has seen livestock herding decline as a viable way of life over the last 2 generations. Since the start of the 21st century, more effective early warning and humanitarian response actions have reduced the number of deaths by famine markedly. That said, many African countries are not self-sufficient in food production, relying on income from cash crops to import food. Agriculture in Africa is susceptible to climatic fluctuations, especially droughts, which can reduce the amount of food produced locally. Other agricultural problems include soil infertility, land degradation and erosion, swarms of desert locusts, which can destroy whole crops, and livestock diseases. The Sahara spreads up to 30 miles per year. The most serious famines have been caused by a combination of drought, misguided economic policies, and conflict. Recent famines in Africa include the 2005-06 Niger food crisis, the 2010 Sahel famine, and in 2012, the Sahel drought put over 10 million people in the Western Sahel at risk of famine according to the Methodist Relief and Development Fund due to a month-long heat wave. West African cuisine and history. West African peoples were trading with the Arab world centuries before the influence of Europeans. Spices such as cinnamon were introduced and became part of the local culinary traditions. Centuries later, European explorers and slave traders influenced regional cuisines to a limited extent. European merchant and slave ships brought chili peppers and tomatoes from the New World to West Africa, and both became ubiquitous components of West African cuisines, along with peanuts, maize, cassava, and plantains. In turn, these slave ships carried African ingredients to the New World, including black-eyed peas and okra. Around the time of the colonial period, particularly during the scramble for Africa, the European settlers defined colonial borders without regard to pre-existing borders, territories, or cultural differences. This bisected tribes and created colonies with varying culinary styles. As a result, it is difficult to sharply define, for example, Senegalese cuisine. Although the European colonists brought many new ingredients to the African continent, they had relatively little impact on the way people cook in West Africa. Architecture of Africa. Like other aspects of the culture of Africa, the architecture of Africa is exceptionally diverse. Throughout the history of Africa, Africans have developed their own local architectural traditions. In some cases, broader regional styles can be identified, such as the Sudano-Sahelian architecture of West Africa. A common theme in traditional African architecture is the use of fractal scaling. Small parts of the structure tend to look similar to larger parts, such as a circular village made of circular houses. African architecture in some areas has been influenced by external cultures for centuries, according to available evidence. Western architecture has influenced coastal areas since the late 15th century, and is now an important source of inspiration for many larger buildings, particularly in major cities. African architecture uses a wide range of materials, including thatch, stick, wood, mud brick, rammed earth, and stone. These material preferences vary by region. North Africa for stone and rammed earth, the Horn of Africa for stone and mortar. West Africa for mud, adobe, Central Africa for thatch, wood, and more perishable materials, Southeast and Southern Africa for stone and thatch, wood. Author Binyavanga Wainaina argues that people from the West would portray Africa as a decrepit and barren land and had failed to look at the wonders of the continent. History of Science and Technology in Africa. Africa has the world's oldest record of human technological achievement. The oldest surviving stone tools in the world have been found in Eastern Africa, and later evidence for tool production by humans' hominin ancestors has been found across West, Central, Eastern, and Southern Africa. The history of science and technology in Africa since then has, however, received relatively little attention compared to other regions of the world, despite notable African developments in mathematics, metallurgy, architecture, and other fields. Military history of Africa. Military history is the study of armed conflict in the history of humanity, and its impact on the societies, cultures, and economies thereof, as well as the resulting changes to local and international relationships. The military history of Africa is one of the oldest military histories in the world. Africa is a continent of many regions with diverse populations, speaking thousands of different languages and practicing an array of cultures and religions. These differences have also been the source of much conflict for millennia. Like the history of Africa, military history on the continent is often divided by region. North Africa was part of the Mediterranean cultures and was integral to the military history of classical antiquity. And East Africa has historically had various states which have often warred with some of the world's most powerful. The military history of modern Africa may be divided into three broad time periods: pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial. Genetic history of West Africa. The genetic history of West Africa encompasses the genetic history of the people of West Africa. The Sahara served as a trans-regional passageway and place of dwelling for people in Africa during various humid phases and periods throughout the history of Africa. Archaic human DNA. According to a 2020 study by Durvasula et al., there are indications that 2% to 19%, or about 6.6 and 7.0%, of the DNA of 4 West African populations may have come from an unknown archaic hominin, which split from the ancestor of humans and Neanderthals between 360 Kia to 1.02 Maya. It also suggests that at least part of this archaic admixture is also present in Eurasians non-Africans, and that the admixture event or events range from 0 to 124 kbp, which includes the period before the out-of-Africa migration and prior to the African-Eurasian split, thus affecting in part the common ancestors of both Africans and Eurasians, non-Africans. Archaic traits found in human fossils of West Africa ancient DNA. As of 2017, human ancient DNA has not been found in the region of West Africa. As of 2020, human ancient DNA has not been forthcoming in the region of West Africa. The Taforalts of Morocco, who have been radiocarbon dated between 15,100 cal-BP and 13,900 cal-BP, and were found to be 63.5% Natufian, were also found to be 36.5% sub-Saharan African, e.g. Hadza, which is drawn out most of all by West Africans, e.g. Yoruba, Mende. 188. In addition to having similarity with the remnant of a more basal sub-Saharan African lineage, e.g., a basal West African lineage shared between Yoruba and Mende peoples, the sub-Saharan African DNA in the Taforalt people of the Ibero-Mauritian culture may be best represented by modern West Africans, e.g., Yoruba. West African hunter-gatherers in the region of Western Central Africa, e.g., Shumlaka, Cameroon, particularly between 8,000 BP and 3,000 BP, were found to be related to modern Central African hunter-gatherers, e.g., Baka, Bakola, Biaka, Bedzan. In 4,000 BP, or even earlier during the Mesolithic, there may have been a population that traversed from Africa, e.g. West Africa or West Central Africa, through the Strait of Gibraltar into the Iberian Peninsula, where admixing between Africans and Iberians, e.g. of northern Portugal of southern Spain, occurred. Based on a small trace presence of sub-Saharan African components in select samples from Iberia, and the discovery of a mitogenome L2A1 found in one individual, while all others belong to European mitochondrial haplogroups. In Granada, a Muslim, Moor, of the Córdoba Caliphate, who was of haplogroups E1B1A1 and H1Plun16-189, as well as estimated to date between 900 CE and 1000 CE, and a Morisco, who was of haplogroup L2E1, as well as estimated to date between 1500 CE and 1600 CE, were both found to be of sub-Saharan West African, i.e., Gambian, and Iberian descent. Y chromosomal DNA Y DNA haplogroups in populations of sub-Saharan Africa: 8 males from Guinea-Bissau, 2 from Niger, 1 from Mali, and 1 from Cabo Verde carried haplogroup A1A. As haplogroup D0, a basal branch of haplogroup DE, was found in 3 Nigerian men. Haplogroup DE may have originated in Africa. As of 19,000 years ago, Africans bearing haplogroup E1B1A V38 likely traversed across the Sahara, from east to west. E1B1A1M2 likely originated in West Africa or Central Africa. Due to the large numbers of West Africans enslaved in the Atlantic slave trade, most African Americans, Afro-Latin Americans, and Afro-Caribbean people are likely to have mixed ancestry from different regions of Western Africa. 60% of African Americans in the study were of the E1B1A haplogroup, within which 22.9% were particularly of the EM2 haplogroup. They also possessed numerous SNPs, e.g. U175, U209, U181, U290, U174, U186, and U247. Mitochondrial DNA haplogroup L2, mtDNA. Map of early diversification of modern humans, with haplogroup L2 entering West Africa. Studies of human mitochondrial DNA suggest that all humans share common ancestors from Africa, originated in the southwestern regions near the coastal border of Namibia and Angola, at the approximate coordinates 12.5° E, 17.5° S, with a divergence in the migration path around 37.5° E, 22.5° An, near the Red Sea. A particular haplogroup of DNA, L2, evolved between 87,000 and 107,000 years ago, or approx. 90,000 YBP. Its age and widespread distribution and diversity across the continent makes its exact origin point within Africa difficult to trace with any confidence. An origin for several L2 groups in West or Central Africa seems likely, with the highest diversity in West Africa. Most of its subclades are largely confined to West and Western Central Africa. Between 75,000 BP and 60,000 BP, Africans bearing haplogroup L3 emerged in East Africa and eventually migrated into and became present in modern West Africans, Central Africans, and non-Africans. During the early period of the Holocene, 50% of sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA was introduced into North Africa by West Africans, and the other 50% was introduced by East Africans. During the modern period, a greater number of West Africans introduced sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA into North Africa than East Africans. During the early period of the Holocene, sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA was introduced into Europe, mostly in Iberia. West Africans probably migrated across Sahelian Africa, North Africa, and the Strait of Gibraltar into Europe and introduced 63% of sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA. During the modern period, West Africans introduced 75% of sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA into Iberia and other parts of Europe, possibly by sea voyage. Around 18,000 BP, Mende people, along with Gambian peoples, grew in population size. In 15,000 BP, Niger-Congo speakers may have migrated from the Sahelian region of West Africa, along the Senegal River, and introduced haplogroup L2A1 into North Africa, resulting in modern Mauritanian peoples and Berbers of Tunisia inheriting it. Between 15,000 BP and 7,000 BP, 86% of sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA was introduced into Southwest Asia by East Africans, largely in the region of Arabia, which constitute 50% of sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA in modern Southwest Asia. In the modern period, 68% of sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA was introduced by East Africans, and 22% was introduced by West Africans, which constitutes 50% of sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA in modern Southwest Asia. Between 11,000 BP and 10,000 BP, Yoruba people and Asan people grew in population size. As early as 11,000 years ago, sub-Saharan West Africans bearing macrohaplogroup L, e.g., L1b1a11, L1b1a6a, L1b1a8, L1b1a9a1, L2a1k, L3d1b1a, may have migrated through North Africa and into Europe, mostly into southern Europe, e.g., Iberia. Amid the Holocene, including the Holocene climate optimum in 8,000 BP, Africans bearing haplogroup L2 spread within West Africa, and Africans bearing haplogroup L3 spread within East Africa. As the largest migration since the out-of-Africa migration, migration from sub-Saharan Africa toward North Africa occurred by West Africans, Central Africans, and East Africans, resulting in migrations into Europe and Asia. Consequently, sub-Saharan African mitochondrial DNA was introduced into Europe and Asia. Autosomal DNA. During the early period of the Holocene, in 9000 BP, Khoisan-related peoples mixed with the ancestors of the Igbo people, possibly in the Western Sahara. Between 2000 BP and 1500 BP, Nilo-Saharan speakers may have migrated across the Sahel, from East Africa into West Africa, and mixed with Niger-Congo-speaking Birom people. In 710 CE, West African-related populations, e.g., Niger-Congo-speaking Birom people, Bantu speakers, and East African-related populations, Nilo-Saharan-speaking Ethiopians, Nilo-Saharan-speaking Chadians, admixed with one another in northern Nigeria and northern Cameroon. Medical DNA. The genomes of Africans commonly found to undergo adaptation are regulatory DNA, and many cases of adaptation found among Africans relate to diet, physiology, and evolutionary pressures from pathogens. Throughout sub-Saharan Africa, genetic adaptation, e.g., RS334 mutation, Duffy blood group, increased rates of G6PD deficiency, sickle cell disease, to malaria has been found among sub-Saharan Africans, which may have initially developed in 7300 BP. Sub-Saharan Africans have more than 90% of the Duffy null genotype. Pediculus. During the Copper Age, an early Islamic era of ancient Israel, West Africans may have migrated into ancient Israel and introduced head louse from West Africa. Sickle cells. Amid the Green Sahara, the mutation for sickle cells originated in the Sahara, or in the northwest forest region of western Central Africa, e.g., Cameroon, by at least 7,300 years ago, though possibly as early as 22,000 years ago. The ancestral sickle cell haplotype to modern haplotypes, e.g., Cameroon, Central African Republic, and Benin, Senegal haplotypes, may have first arose in the ancestors of modern West Africans, bearing haplogroups E1b1a1, L485, and E1b1a1, U175, or their ancestral haplogroup, E1b1a1, M4732. West Africans, e.g., Yoruba and Asan of Nigeria, bearing the Benin sickle cell haplotype, may have migrated through the northeastern region of Africa into the western region of Arabia. West Africans, e.g., Mende of Sierra Leone, bearing the Senegal sickle cell haplotype, may have migrated into Mauritania, 77% modern rate of occurrence, and Senegal, 100%. They may also have migrated across the Sahara, into North Africa, and from North Africa, into southern Europe, Turkey, and a region near northern Iraq and southern Turkey. Some may have migrated and introduced the Senegal and Benin sickle cell haplotypes into Basra, Iraq, where both occur equally. Schistosomes, according to Steverding, 2020, while not definite. Near the African Great Lakes, schistosomes, e.g., S. mansoni, S. hematobium, underwent evolution. Subsequently, there was an expansion alongside the Nile River. From Egypt, the presence of schistosomes may have expanded, via migratory Yoruba people, into Western Africa. Thereafter, schistosomes may have expanded via migratory Bantu peoples into the rest of sub-Saharan Africa, e.g., Southern Africa, Central Africa. Thalassemia. Through pathways taken by caravan, or via travel amid the Almoravid period, a population, e.g., sub-Saharan West Africans, may have introduced the 29 AGV thalassemia mutation, found in notable amounts among African Americans, into the North African region of Morocco. Domesticated animal DNA. While the Niger-Congo migration may have been from West Africa into Kordofan, possibly from Kordofan, Sudan, Niger-Congo speakers accompanied by undomesticated helmeted guinea fowls may have traversed into West Africa, domesticated the helmeted guinea fowls by 3000 BCE, and via the Bantu expansion, traversed into other parts of sub-Saharan Africa, e.g., Central Africa, East Africa, Southern Africa. The story of West Africa is not just a history lesson. It's a reminder of a golden age the world too often forgets. Empires rose, knowledge thrived, and a legacy was born that still echoes through today's culture, art, and identity. But here's the truth. This is just the beginning. There are still so many stories left untold. Ancient cities buried in the sands, legendary rulers you've never heard of, and cultures that changed the world long before colonization. If this fascinated you, hit that subscribe button, because in the next video, we're diving into the mysteries of the Nok civilization and the origins of African metallurgy. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Drop a comment below with your favorite part of West Africa's history, or something new you learned today. And until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and never stop uncovering Africa's true story. The story of West Africa is more than just a forgotten chapter. It's a living legacy of power, innovation, and resilience. From the golden empires of Ghana and Mali to the scholarly brilliance of Timbuktu, this is history that demands to be remembered. But this is just the beginning. In the next video, we uncover the mystery of the Nok civilization, one of Africa's earliest creators of iron and terracotta art. It's a story that will completely change how you see early African technology and culture. Click here to watch the full Africa Before Colonialism playlist and dive deeper into the roots of African greatness. Or head straight to the next video, the Nok civilization, Africa's ancient tech pioneers. It's waiting for you right now. Comment below with your favorite empire or historical figure, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you want more powerful stories like this. Let's keep Africa's true story alive, one video at a time.